What's the story, everyone? How are you? For those of you checking in live, it's great to have you here. For those of you who will be catching up with us a little later on and watching the video, I hope wherever it finds you that you're safe and that you're healthy. Today, we are going to talk about a topic that I think is going to be relatively important to many of us. It probably has been something on our minds for the last few weeks as we've moved to the online atmosphere, as we've brought in our workspaces into the virtual world. So I'm going to cover a few tips, some best practices, some ideas that might help you. For those of you that are set up, hopefully we share something today that you haven't thought about. And for those of you who haven't yet gotten yourself set up for a digital or a camera delivery, there is lots of information out there, and hopefully today I'll be able to get you thinking in the right direction. And I am excited. I think we have some hopefully relatively interesting and helpful content for you. This is going to be part one of a 5-part series. So every week in April, I'm going to do a live broadcast, and we're going to discuss some topics, some best practices, some tips in regards to communicating effectively, of course, but given the need right now for online and digital communication, this 5-part series will focus entirely on online and digital communication channels. So part one today is going to be focused particularly on how you may be able to maximize your space in your home, some thoughts on setting up your environment, maybe even utilizing a few items that you have around your house to try to accentuate your delivery. I know many of us right now who are working in the virtual spaces in our homes, we've all tried to carve out our corner. We've all tried to identify where our space is going to be, trying to recreate those routines. And so certainly that's part of what we're ultimately going to be discussing and talking about today. So with that being said, I would like to kind of transition into something that I have done a little while ago. So here you'll see an image of me on the screen where we put together a video tutorial a couple years ago. And we, of course, we like the way that this shot looks. It's well framed, it's well lit, but really what today is about is going behind the scenes. And if we go behind the scenes of this shot that you see here right now, you'll actually find that there's a lot of household items and some simple things that we can do to get a shot like this, when in reality, it actually looks like this. So we'll come back to this in a little bit, but if you just take a look at the shot for a second, you'll see household everyday items, you'll see some things moved around, and really trying to maximize what it is that we have available to us to ensure that our shots look good when we're presenting on camera. Or for those of you who are thinking about making some video content, such as I'm doing right now, maybe there's an opportunity for you to step into that space as well. So let's get into it, and let's start by talking a little bit about our environment. I really want to encourage everyone to rethink the idea of what a great office looks like now that they're working from home. So when we're out there back in the real world, and hopefully the months and years to come, we'd love to have a large office space that accommodates a lot of folks. We can have some great meetings, plenty of space to put our feet up. But right now, while we're at home and going forward, you really only need a relatively small amount of space to make this work. In fact, if we think about the space that I'm videotaping in right now, it's wider, right, than my wingspan is. Or sorry, it's narrower than my wingspan. So this is really a 6-foot by approximately 6-foot space. And so as long as I can keep this space behind me decluttered, clean, and well lit, you have plenty of room to work with to put on a great performance. So one of the things that we want to do then is we want to identify what is a great distraction-free space. Now, for many of us, the most distraction-free location in our homes is oftentimes our bedrooms. However, I want to be very clear and make a recommendation here that just about under any circumstance, we really want to avoid shooting in our bedrooms unless you have an ideal location, because what happens is we're inviting people into our homes, but then we're inviting them into our personal space. Now, one of the things that I've seen over the years in working with folks in this environment is they'll actually bring somebody into their bedroom because they think it's quiet, they can control the location, which is fine, but a lot of times we may end up with something that looks like this. And this isn't ideal. So if you're on the call and you're working with your supervisor and you're trying to tell them how organized and how diligent you've been, how much you've been paying attention to detail, and behind you, they're peeking around looking, wow, their room's really messy, it's probably not sending the message that we want. So in most cases, I would really encourage you to avoid ending up in your personal spaces because of the message that it may send. Now, with that being said, a lot of you might actually have some spaces that look a little bit more like this. your home office space. And so while you might actually look at that home office space and think, okay, that seems like it's a great idea, one of the problems with home office spaces is that they become a little bit hard to control. So if we go back to our background here for a second, right, and we actually think about what this might look like, in this home office space that I have here behind me, while it looks good on my green screen, it's actually not all that ideal in the real life. So over my right-hand shoulder here, you have this nice natural light coming in, and that's fantastic, except for when you go on camera. One of the problems with natural light coming in is that it's really hard to control. So in the morning, that light may be on one side of your house, but by the afternoon or the evening calls, that light has shifted, which means you're constantly trying to adjust your camera to get the right lighting. So one of the things that I would recommend, if this were my home office or I had a home office that looked relatively like this, is I would encourage you to find some really good blackout shades and try to eliminate as much of that natural light as you can when you're going on camera so that you can avoid any of the issues that might come with it. All right, so these are some little things that we want to think about when it comes to our home offices. The other thing that I've been hearing and seeing about, and I had a nice conversation with my neighbor about this the other day, was talking about how we might consider creating some virtual backspaces like the one that I'm using here in today's production. So there are some programs that will allow you to do this a lot easier than maybe once was. For those of you at home using Zoom, I've got a great solution for you. So one of the things that I'm going to encourage you to do is consider taking your space and either painting the wall one entire singular color, or if you don't have that ability, you can go ahead and hang a sheet. Now when you hang that sheet, you're going to want to make sure it's nice and tight so you're not getting any ripples or shadows in the sheet. But once you've done that, you will then have a backdrop that a lot of the programs, in particular Zoom, will allow you to utilize to create a virtual backdrop. So you might be thinking, well, how do I do that? Because that sounds really exciting and I want to make that happen. Okay, so the way in which that we can do that is relatively quite simple. So if you look on the screen right here along with me and you go into your Zoom settings, on the left-hand side of that menu, it'll say Virtual Background. When you click on Virtual Background, you may get something that looks like this, or you may need to come down here and click on I have a green screen. So when you click on that, you're going to open up a new set of windows and options in the Zoom program. From there, you see this tiny little box right here. You're going to click on that, and what it's going to allow you to do when you click on that is you're going to get to come into your camera, which will be live for this shoot, and you'll get to select the color of your background. When you do that, you're telling the program that this is the color of your backdrop and to use that color for your chroma key. Now typically green has been used for a chroma key, but you can really use any color for the Zoom program. So once you've selected the color behind you, you'll then be able to go down and to start to select some of your virtual backgrounds. So you can see here, I went and changed it to this lovely picture of me in front of the beaches in Bundoran that you of course saw last week. Right? But you can then upload any photograph that is your favorite scene and set that as your background. Now again, we just want to make sure, think about the message you're sending, think about the communication norm that you're setting. What is your background trying to convey? If it's a social event, if you're trying to have fun, or maybe you're trying to invite folks to go somewhere with you, and certainly the background that I've chosen for this picture might work. But if you're looking for something a little bit more professional, Zoom doesn't offer a lot of options for the stock, but you can go online and you can probably Google search brick background and go ahead and do a screenshot of that image, upload that to Zoom, and now you'll have a great virtual looking background for relatively no cost. It's a great way, by the way, if you have a lot of paint in your basement hanging around like I do and you've been wanting to get rid of it and you do have a space, go ahead and empty the gallon on that wall. Make sure that it is ideally a low matte finish. So one of the things that we don't want to do with our background chroma keys is we don't want them reflecting a ton of light. So if you have some low matte finish, that would be ideal. Even an enamel or an eggshell would also be an appropriate surface. Try to avoid those glosses or those semi-glosses. They'll reflect a lot of light and they can be very difficult to work with. I'll talk about this a little bit more in the weeks to come when we talk about setting up some of the programs. But one final tip on your chroma key is to make sure that it's really well lit. So up here to my right hand side today, you'll see that my face is relatively well lit, but this is also helping with my background and making sure that there is contrast between me on the camera and the background behind me. Speaking of being on camera, let's talk about some tips that you might use. Now, if you haven't heard this over the last 2 weeks, then this is something that we really want to make sure that you know. We want to be trying to utilize what is known as a rule of thirds, and it's going to be really important that our eye lines, just as mine is here today, is cutting across that top third of the camera. Okay? Now this is important for a few reasons, right? Because what it does is it allows continuity, but it also applies the rule of thirds, and what that's going to allow us to do is have a really nice looking shot. But there's more to this, all right? The other thing that we want to do to create this is to make sure that our camera height is at the same exact level as our eye line. So very often we've been on calls, right? And sometimes people are really low and they're far away, right? Sometimes people are unfortunately way too close, right? Sometimes the camera's too low, and we've all had that shot where we're unfortunately looking up somebody's nose, and we really want to avoid all of those scenarios. So get that camera height up. Now, what might that include? You might need to raise your desk, or you might need to put some books, right, or something underneath of your laptop if you possibly can to raise it up. If you're using a desktop and you actually have to raise the entire monitor, maybe you want to get a shelving system. So that shelving system now becomes functional underneath your desktop for storing files and paperwork, and it gets that camera height up to a really nice place. The other reason that this is important, for those of you who are on lots of Zoom calls, there's something to be said when you can look around everybody at the Zoom call and they all have their eye lines at the same level. It does create a sense of eye contact, which can be really important to try to create continuity in the conversation. It also helps with setting some digital norms, which we'll talk about again in some of the later series. The other thing I want to mention, and you'll see this on the slide here right now, is consider raising your entire desk height in your seat to make sure that you're sitting up straight. So right now, I am sitting up about as straight as I relatively can, and it's not because I just have good posture. My chair is set at a relatively high height. My feet are off the ground, and so I'm sitting in a position that allows me to stay upright. There's so many great reasons for this, including making sure that we have good posture. It also allows us to articulate and accentuate our voice, and it actually gives us a better demonstration of, a better posture demonstration to our audience to allow us to seem comfortable, to allow us to remain poised in these situations. So I went out and got myself a chair that allows me to adjust the height of it rather simply, and I like to be able to swivel. For the camera work that I'm doing, I think it's nice if I'm able to move. If you don't have that, one of the things that might work for you is if you have a stool. For those of you with breakfast counters or islands in your home, go and grab that stool for your next Zoom call, sit on the stool, raise your camera up, and I think you're going to feel a lot more confident when you're on the camera. All right, so here is a little trick that some of you might want to use. If you have a smartphone, and I'm sure most of you do, you might want to consider using it as your webcam. So if you're using a built-in camera, or you would like to take it to the next level and you want to be able to show your audience maybe something that you're working with, you can actually plug in your iPhone or your smartphone using the cable that it comes with and connects to your USB. So I can take my regular iPhone right here and I can plug it in via USB, and a lot of the programs that we're using right now will allow us to connect. Now, there are some programs out there that you can download and that you can use, and I'll show you those in a minute. But just to give you a sense of what this effect might look like, let me go ahead and show you how this might work. So on my program right now, I'm going to be able to bring in my iPhone. And so you can actually now see that my iPhone can show whatever it's looking at through the camera, which is pretty cool. So the next segment, as you might be able to guess, is going to be on headphones. But if I wanted to give you a really nice close look at my headphones, I could do this. Maybe I wanted to show you a little bit more about that light that I was telling you about. Well, there it is right there. So being able to use our iPhone not just as a webcam, but also as a source cam to be able to highlight some documents can be a really great feature. So in case you wanted to actually use that, you want to find out a little bit more information, I have actually gone and done some research, and here you have the program that is going to allow us to do that, and it is known as Epoch Webcam. And so you can use it for Mac or PC, and you can use this program for free, and it works quite well. The other recommendation that I would have, if you don't have a relatively longer USB cable, go ahead and get yourself at least a 10-footer. This really opens up some options. So if I wanted to, I could take my 10-foot cable right now, I could set it across the room, and I could actually have two cameras, or maybe I could have a guest, of course, when we're not self-quarantining anymore, and you could actually bring somebody on and they could have their own camera. So lots of really good ideas here for those of you just thinking about ways to use those resources that you have in your home, whatever those resources might be. If you've got questions right now, if you've got thoughts or comments, or you share this with somebody and they want to get in touch and they're looking for some ideas or solutions, you can even send us a picture of your office. I love to diagnose and try to help people ways that they can rearrange their furniture and try to improve the look of their shop. All right, let's go ahead and we'll keep things moving here. And the last topic that we have for today is sound. So it's often been said that it's good to look good, but it's better to sound good. And that really can't be more true than it is if you're doing any type of remote work or you're meeting on camera. So it's really critical that you take some time to think about not just what your environment looks like, but also how your environment might be impacting your sound. Let's start with the obvious. A plug-in microphone is almost always better than a built-in microphone. It allows you to move it around. They tend to have a lot more of a condenser unit inside of them that'll produce better sound, and ultimately something that doesn't come built into your computer is not going to fall victim to the rattling of keys or the clicking of your mouse, which can be really frustrating if you're on a call and somebody's taking notes, but their microphone is built in and all you're doing is hearing that click clack, and it becomes relatively frustrating. So you may not necessarily have a plug-in microphone, or at least you might not think you do. More on that in a second. Now, if you're on a live call, the other thing that I can't encourage everyone to do, and somebody out there right now is going to thank me for saying this because they were on a call today, right? But you really want to consider using headphones. If you're on a live call and you have to have your speakers turned all the way up so that you can hear folks, one of the problems is that you may get an echo effect. And that's caused by when your microphone is picking up the sound coming out of your speakers. And it essentially creates a cyclical loop where the sound continues to go back through the program, and it's what creates that interference, that really loud, sharp noise. So it is okay to use your headphones, and they actually can look pretty cool when you put them on. And so when I have my headphones on, one of the things I can do is I avoid that echo effect, and I'm sure that I get greater clarity. Also, it helps you prevent spreading lots of noise throughout your home office right now when I'm sure everybody would like a little bit of peace and quiet. So use your headphones for more than just yourself. Use them for everybody else to avoid having those interference issues. Now, I mentioned that you may not have a plug-in microphone, but many of you probably still have a good old-fashioned pair of headphones, and many of you might even have headphones that used to have the microphone built in. These work, and they actually work quite well. One of the things that's great about these types of setups is not only do I get a set of headphones, right? I actually get the microphone right next to my mouth, and that's really important because I'm going to pick up really good sound. So if you have a set of these laying around, maybe from an old phone that you were using, those will work. Bluetooth headsets will also work. Of course, make sure that you're syncing them to your computer and testing that audio before you get started, but they will work. They're relatively effective. They're probably laying around your house in a junk drawer right now, so pull them out and give them a shot, and hopefully that'll give you a little bit better sound going forward. The last thing that we might want to highlight here a little bit is how do we improve the environment that we're in if it doesn't sound really good? So one of the things that we have to be aware of is that sound moves and carries and travels, and if it doesn't have anything to absorb it, it can give you a really echoey sound, like you're in an empty hallway. So one of the things that you might consider doing is finding some objects in your home to bring into your small space, remember, and by bringing them into your small space to help absorb sound, and they'll improve your sound quality. So if you go into a studio, and many of you have probably seen or at least are aware of a sound studio, they tend to look something like the picture on the left-hand side here. So you see a lot of foam, you see a lot of fabric, you see heavy walls, and the idea is, of course, to absorb the sound. Well, you can create your own sound studio in your house with, again, items that you may have left over upstairs in the attic, downstairs in the basement. I've seen people bring pillows into their room. I've seen people create their own boxes full of foam with the microphone stuck inside. I've even heard of people actually getting underneath their comforter if they wanted to record a voiceover so that they had a really nice absorbent environment for their sound. So there are lots of solutions out there. I've found this great picture from our friends at soundonsound.com. Check them out if you're looking for some more information. Here we have a couple gentlemen trying to do a recording in probably what wasn't a great bedroom for sound. A couple mattresses stuck in the room. It absorbs the sound and it gives a little bit of a better sound. So one of the things to think about here is you have lots of ideas around your house now to think about. Start when you're walking around. Start thinking about things a little bit differently and trying to find ways that you can resource or maybe improve your on-camera appearance just with the things that you have in your house. All right, so that is all of part one. Hopefully you found it interesting. Hopefully you found something that you hadn't thought about before. If you know somebody that needs this, please share it with them. If you have questions or comments, we would love to hear from you. Go ahead and send me a message on Facebook, and we would love to take a look at your office setup or help troubleshoot some of your issues. Part 2 next week will be all about using video software and programs. So I'm going to go through a few highlights. We'll talk a little bit about QuickTime. We'll make sure that everybody's comfortable doing a screenshot, and then we can dive into a couple more of the Zoom features that I'm sure everybody is getting themselves acquainted with right now. Keep an eye out on the RPM Facebook page for details on when we will be showing that. And if you haven't, please like our new RPM Communication Consulting Facebook page and tell your friends. The more information that we can get from you, the more focused and tailored that we would like to make our videos. And as always, we want to encourage you to keep the conversation going. So to everyone out there, can't say this enough, take care of yourselves. We're thinking of you. Stay healthy. Stay at home if you can. And we look forward to connecting and seeing everyone again real soon. All right, take care, everybody.